So hi everyone. Am I in focus?
Yes.
All right. Hi everyone. My name is Matt Hearns, and I am a comic book artist for Sonic the Hedgehog, Mega Man, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I've also done a lot of work for IDW Comics, as well as paper cuts on books like Gumby, Geronimo Stilton, and whatnot. I work on a lot of books. I've been working in comics for about 10 years, and this is my artist panel, in which we're going to kind of, I guess, I'm going to talk about a little bit about my background, and hopefully you guys have Q&A, otherwise it'll be an awkward hour of us a staring match. So anyway, so I started in comics 10 years ago, on the Sonic the Hedgehog comic books, actually. My friend Ian Flynn at the time had just started working on the Sonic comics. He, before that, had done fan comics and stuff. One of them was called Utter M. And I was a young man right out of high school looking for something to draw because I was interested in getting into comics. So I was like, hey, like, I should find someone that's writing comics to practice on their stuff. So I met Ian. I sent him a portfolio. He was a little weirded out by that because no one in fan comics had ever sent him a portfolio before. He and I worked together on that. And when he started working for the Sonic the Hedgehog comics in 2005, 2006, I was like, hey man, like, it would be really great if you could like give me like a letter of introduction or a letter of recommendation or something to your editor at the time. He was Mike Pellerito was the guy. And Ian was very wonderful and said absolutely. And so he helped get my stuff in front of his editor's eyes. And Mike Pellerito took a look at my stuff and basically was like, this is great and unpublishable, basically. This is crap. So I spent about a year doing what typically happens in comics, where you're sending a portfolio in to an editor, and he is getting on the phone with you and being like, all right, so this is all the things you've done horribly wrong, and here's how we fix them. You know, like, and I did that off and on for about a year until 2007, October 2007. So this will be 10 years on the Sonic comic for me. I got an email out of the blue that was basically like, hey, like, we have a project for you that we'd love to get you to draw. And I was super excited. At the time, I'd also already done a couple of colorist kind of jobs, and I was like, hey, like, I also like the color. And he was like, we got a drawing job for you. And I was like, that'll do. Yeah, I'll take that. And so I filled in for Tracy Yardley, who is an incredible talent on Sonic the Hedgehog. Like, he's been drawing it for as long as Ian's been writing it, which is a couple years longer than I've been doing this. I filled in for him for about 4 or 5 issues in 2007, 2008, and then they lost a colorist. One of the longtime colorists on the book, he departed the comics, and they were like, hey, like, we would love to have you do coloring, you know, like, because again, like, I'd expressed interest. I was like, I like Photoshop, you know, like, and so they let me do that. And my first issue printed incorrectly because I screwed up. So my first issue was Sonic the Hedgehog 195, and I was working on that around Halloween. And I remember having to like call Mike Pellerito up while he's like trick-or-treating with his kids, being like, what have I done wrong, man? Like, you know, like, what, like, because he kept asking me to fix it, and I was like, I don't know how. Like, this is the first time I've ever colored a comic book professionally. Yeah, like, so I did 195, which was called Hedgehog Havoc. It was all of the Sonic like Hedgehog characters, like Scourge and Silver and Shadow and Sonic, and at the time, Robbo the Hedge. I'm hoping that if you're in this panel, like, some of these names might ring a bell to you, possibly. Like, just a ton of, Amy Rose was there, her evil doppelganger was there, like, we had a lot of hedgehogs. And I did that, and then I took over as the regular colorist for the book around issue 200. So I was kind of surprised that after I had badly screwed up 195, that they actually let me back for like the big issue 200. I was like, this is a roll of the dice that you guys are taking. Yeah, so I've been working on that ever since. Yeah. I've also worked on pretty much everything Sonic related that Archie Comics has produced in the last 8 years or so. Sonic Universe, as well as the Sonic Super Special magazine, as well as the Sonic Digest comics that go into the grocery store. And then I also work on Sonic Mega Drive, which was this really awesome book that we were doing for the 25th anniversary last year. It was written by Ian Flynn. So for those that don't know, Ian is also a lot more famous than me. Ian also has done some writing for the Sonic Boom cartoon show. And then we had it drawn and illustrated by Tyson Hess, who, for those that don't know, is a lot more famous than me. He actually worked on the Sonic Mania trailer that just came out a few weeks ago. And then there was me coloring it. And I'm, again, much less famous than all those other guys. But super excited to work on that. We've done 2 issues so far. We have a 3rd issue hopefully in the works. I'm sure one of the questions that I'll probably get at some point is the status of the Sonic the Hedgehog comics, so let me go ahead and jump on that. Currently, the Sonic the Hedgehog comics are in a state of limbo, I guess is the best way to express it. Essentially, Sega and Archie Comics are currently talking about kind of what the future of the comics is going to be. And essentially myself and everyone else that works on the books, like that is what we know. And they have said that as soon as that decision is reached, they'll let us know and they'll let fans know. So just to answer that one that I'm sure is probably in the chamber, first off. You had a hand raised? No. All right. Yes.
So what was the big mistake, bro? You didn't tell me.
When I screwed up number 195? Oh
up?
gosh. So if you look at the book, you'll notice that all the artwork is a little bit smaller than it's supposed to be. Like the panels that are supposed to go up to the edge are what are called full bleed. And none of my panels were up to full bleed, basically. Like, the artwork that was supposed to be drawn to the edge is like, like half an inch in, basically. And I, no idea what I did wrong. They basically gave me an issue that already had been done and was like, reverse engineer this. And I was like, I'll do my best. And clearly that did not work. I look back on it fondly, and I look back on it mostly just being like, oh, thank God that they let me do it again. That's very nice that they let me do that again. And it's honestly, my relationship with Archie, especially there at the beginning, is very unusual, because honestly I look back on that stuff and I'm like, I don't know why they ever let me color it. I don't think it was particularly up to a professional quality at the time, but they kind of let me do what's very unheard of in comics nowadays, which is kind of learning on the job, and thank goodness they did, because I would not be where I am today without that. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, other questions? Yes.
So I've noticed a lot of the different books you've done, like say Sonic Boom,
yes,
and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They all have, I'd say they have distinct different styles in the way you color.
Yes.
Is that something where you talk with an editorial to kind of get a sense of what they want to, or is that just you yourself thinking Power Rangers should look like this, Sonic should look like this, and also just why you chose a different color palette for the Boom comic versus the main book?
Well, so Boom, when we were working on Boom, it was drawn by Evan Stanley initially, and essentially the way she was doing backgrounds and everything was a very kind of a sketchy style. Which was actually very fun to color, super easy for me to color, because I was like, oh, this is just kind of essentially painting really quick in the background, as opposed to really specific details. And Boom was taking place on a lot of beachfronts, essentially, and I was like, let's just go solidly tropical, just really, really tropical colors, I really enjoyed Boom a lot just for that reason, because it was so different from everything else. And, typically, the artwork, the coloring style is going to be informed a little bit by the artwork that exists, what they're drawing. With Mighty Morphin Power Rangers specifically, they had come to me and been like, hey, like we saw some Archie sample pages that you had done, like because when we were getting ready for the Archie reboot, they had sent me a couple pages and were like, hey, we'd love to see your take on these, you know, like and I did a couple passes at it, sent it in, and they ultimately went with different colors for it. But I was very proud of the stuff, so I put them on like my website professionally, like, you know, like, hey, here are some portfolio pages, and the editors at Boom saw those and were like, hey, like we really like what you did on that, you know, like can you kind of mimic that for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers? And so I did, and honestly, like there was a great review I saw of the first issue that came out in which someone was like, hey, like the style I used on Power Rangers was kind of cell shaded and whatnot, and someone was like, we really like that the coloring like mimicked kind of like, you know, like a Japanese cell shaded cartoon kind of thing, you know, like because I mean like Power Rangers originally comes from Japan, Super Sentai and all that. And I mean like honestly they gave me a lot more credit for it than was really what was going on. But I was like, yeah, no, exactly. I am that smart. So so it's typically informed kind of by what I'm working on. I actually do a lot of style matching jobs as well. So colorists, what we do is we are at the very end of the production line. So comic books are assembled by a team to be able to meet our deadlines, essentially. Like, because comic books are produced every month. So you've got the writer and editor, you've got a penciler, oftentimes an inker, not always, colorist, letterer. And so colorists, like we're at the tail end, which means that if something has gone horribly wrong up here, we're screwed. So, in much more colorful language, essentially. So, being at the very last end of it, like, you know, like there are times when a colorist cannot meet their deadlines, and so they might get someone else to help out. So, like, you'll actually see that a lot of colorists, like, anytime you're like, there was like 3 different colorists on this book, or 4 different, like, they have brought us all in at the last minute, and hopefully you'll notice that it doesn't look that differently. Because we're essentially doing style matching. Like we're doing our best to kind of make it so that you can't tell that someone else has worked on this. That idea was similar to Mega Man. Like on Mega Man, we actually had a lot of different artists come in and do story arcs to make sure everything was staying on track. And each story arc, we'd have a different artist, and essentially it was our inker Gary Martin and myself doing colors, and we were told to essentially make it look like it was seamless, like that nothing had really changed, so to speak. We were trying to keep the style consistent so that like the average goer might, like the average reader might be like, oh, like I can tell something looks different, but like it looks like it belongs in that same family of artwork, you know, like so that's kind of the style consistency is a big piece of a colorist position. Yeah. Yes.
Out of like all the books, like Sonic, Mega Man, or any other ones, is there a specific issue or arc that you liked working on the most?
Oh gosh. So anytime we get to do a lot of different locations is my favorite story arcs. Like so my final story arc on Mega Man before we broke for Worlds Unite, and then later on came back and then went on hiatus. Like was we were starting to adapt the 3rd Mega Man game. And things that I didn't know is that apparently in the canon storyline of the video game, Mega Man goes to space. I never would have got that from the NES game, but apparently he goes into outer space, and all these different places that he's fighting robot masters are supposed to be different space colonies. And it was a lot of fun to just kind of like do different color palettes and stuff, or like, you know, like, hey, like here's Shadow Man, and like, you know, like all the lava and fire and stuff in the background. Like here's Hard Man in like a cave and whatnot. Needle Man weirdly on a pirate ship, I guess. You know, like just different settings. Like if a story arc is said like just like solidly like 4 issues back to back, where it's like we're not moving anywhere, like we're not changing locations. Like by the 4th issue, I'm like I am ready to go. Like let's on to the next one. You know, like. So for me, like anything with variety is my go-to. I actually really liked a Sonic Universe story arc that's centered on Nicole, actually. We did like the main setting of that was an island, I want to say, from a tutorial section for Knuckles Chaotix. And so it was kind of like style matching that, you know, like to make sure that that video game, I almost called it 16-bit, but I guess it's technically 32x, to make sure that style of video game like translates to the page. And with that, we had that setting, and then we had like the virtual world setting, which was just like this super fun, like all red kind of place because it was being taken over by an evil AI. You know, like that was a lot of fun as well. So anything that's like super special effects and anything that has variety of locations, that's kind of my go-to. Like I'm like, yeah, no, like that one I like. Yes.
I'm curious, because you're primarily a penciler or colorist, why you chose that as a career path in comic books as opposed to writing, for example.
Sure.
Would you ever like to write a story, Sonic, Mega Man, any of them?
Sure. So for me, like, I didn't have a ton of interest in writing, but like, starting out as a penciler, I noticed that it didn't work well for my like control freak tendencies, I suppose. Like, being at a colorist, like you are like the last person touching the artwork, so to speak. Like you're, you know, like, hey, here you go. Here's the pass. You know, like here's the final artwork. This is what's going to print, or pretty close to what's going to print. And being a penciler, like it felt very, for me at least, out of control. You know, like you draw it and you hand it off, and then you're like, all right, bye. You know, like there goes my baby. You know, like, and not that like I couldn't trust that the guys I was working with were gonna do an awesome job with it, but for me it was just like it felt more comfortable being the last man on it. And you know, like I honestly like found that for me, I really liked doing the kind of work that a colorist does, which is a lot of like, hey, like, you know, saving books and making sure stuff gets out on time and all that kind of stuff. It's hell on sleep at times, you know, like, but for me, it's really rewarding work in particular. And for me, drawing and all that, like, I was like, all right, like, I don't really enjoy drawing comics, but I enjoy drawing. So for me, I was like, I'll get to continue that pursuit kind of outside of comic books, essentially, like kind of outside of that intense monthly drain. Because comics, drawing comics in particular is a pretty strenuous job. So for me, like drawing, I was like, let's keep that. Like I'll do illustration work on the side. You know, like outside of comics, I do a lot of graphics and whatnot for like iOS video games and stuff like that. So I'll keep that kind of on the side, do commissions, do artwork that I have at conventions, and we'll just do coloring as my main comic book kind of thing.
So you'd never consider writing, for example?
I have not. So
It never crossed your mind?
never did.
Interesting.
Yes.
To go back to what we said about, you know, your job being lost in the line and how sometimes you have tight deadlines. So what on a average comic, what is a good like average length of time you get to color 20 pages?
A good amount of time is if everything has gone correctly, we will get the artwork about 2 weeks before it's due, essentially. And that'll be 2 solid weeks. I'll have 20 pages of artwork to color. Oftentimes it is at best a week, and oftentimes at worst it would be like, you know, you have 2-3 days kind of deal. You know, like I have run the gamut as far as deadlines go. I have definitely had the books that come in so early that even I can manage to hand it in early. And I've had the books that have come in so late that, you know, like I'm pulling my hair out. You know, like just FYI, this happened when I was 18, and I started graying at 28. So, you know, like, but the really intense deadlines and stuff, like, the less of those possible, the better, typically. So, other questions? Yes.
When you first started drawing and whatnot,
Yeah.
did you practice more so with like reference images, or were you doing a lot of your own characters?
Absolutely. So like, when I've been drawing all my life, and what I did when I was like super young is that I would tape paper to the TV and trace the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Yeah. But yeah, doing from reference is absolutely vital. Like, I mean, like, you know, like if you can take a look at something and be able to recreate that, you know, like it's eye for detail. It's, you know, like being able to kind of understand the shapes as they're presented to you and be able to replicate that. And then from there, you know, like once you kind of had that down, like, because I mean, every kid starts by doodling, and then eventually they get to tracing, and then you kind of go back to doodling again, you know, like, so you, from there, like, go in and you're just like, okay, like, I am taking what I've learned by kind of copying what I see, and I'm now able to make a version of it that is my own, essentially, you know, like, that's when you can kind of start, like, playing around with different characters, different ideas, you know, like, learning from there, like, drawing-wise, like, the big thing, it depends. Like, if you want to start drawing comics, the important thing is learning to draw everything, essentially, because the comic drawing is very different from regular drawing. Like, if you want to be an illustrator, you know, like, you want to produce artwork that's got pop and attention, like, that's great. But if you want to draw comics, it's storytelling, you know, like a scene in which a couple of people are talking over cups of coffee inside of like a Starbucks or something, that's not going to be like epically dynamic, you know, like, but you have to be able to render that, you know, like, because that's what's in the script, you know, like, and that's an important piece of the story. So that's the big difference typically. So, you had a question.
What was it like working on the Sonic Mania trailer, and like, is there like more of that like in the game, you know?
I have no idea on both counts actually. So I worked with Tyson on Sonic Mega Drive, and he's the one that did the animation for it. So I had nothing connected to the trailer. In fact, I had no idea he was working on it. And when I saw it, like, because I mean, like, coloring his stuff, like, I've stared at his artwork for hours on end. When I saw the trailer, I was like, this looks really familiar, you know, like, I was like, I swear, this must be Tyson. And then sure enough, like, he was like, hey, like, finally can reveal this. And I was like, yeah, all right, like, I'm not crazy. I thought that was familiar. So, yes?
What would you give advice to people who want to do comics? And even though RG Sonic, from what we've heard, is not going to make any more comics, what would you give advice for people who want to do Sonic comics?
Okay. Well, first off, I mean, like, not the status of the Sonic comics, not known for sure right now. Like, actually, so Sega and Archie are currently kind of talking about what the future of the books is going to be, and that, as I understand it, is a ongoing discussion. So nothing for sure yet. But honestly, like, if you want to make Sonic comics, make Sonic comics. Like Ian Flynn, the writer on Sonic Comics, and myself, like, we did fan comics 12 years ago when we were much younger men. You know, like, and like, honestly, like, you know, like, if you're a fan of something and you want to tell a story with it, go for it. Like, Evan Stanley is one of our writers and artists. She's actually written for the Sonic Boom cartoon as well. She still has a fan comic that she's been doing for years on end, that she is still actively producing today, like updates every Sunday kind of deal. Like, if you want to make a Sonic comic, go for it. Like, there are a lot of them out there, and the thing is that, like, you know, like, express yourself, you know, like, if you got a story to tell, go for it, you know, like, you never know who's gonna see it, essentially, you know, like, because I can tell you right now, like, I believe, I want to say some of the backstory for Tyson getting introduced to this was that I think he gave them like a parody comic strip. Like, he just like went to the editors at Archie Comics and was like, hey, like, so here's like a parody of all the stuff that you do, essentially. And, you know, like, it's a genius parody. Like, you know, like, it's fantastic. And, you know, like, they were like, let's hire this guy, you know? So if you've got a story to tell, do it. Yeah, draw it. Yes?
I just want to say, I can't, were you, I believe you were the one who colored the Archie pitch for a Mario comic, which I believe either Tracy or Ben Bates drew.
Yes.
So can you talk a bit more about how that came about and why nothing happened?
Yeah, so this was several years ago. I want to say, I think they pitched it twice, possibly, and I'm not sure if we pitched it or Nintendo came to, I'm not I'm super unfamiliar with all the details there. So basically, I think people know about its existence because some of the artists on the books have, I think, sold the original artwork for all that kind of stuff, and people have kind of gotten around, like I think it's shown up on Nintendo fan sites and whatnot. Basically, I want to say the last time we were trying to get that in the works was around 2014, and we produced a number of cover artwork and a number of pin-up artwork, just character artwork and whatnot to show to Nintendo. I have no idea where things fell apart, or if things ever really got off the ground with it. I know that all of us that work on the books, we're all huge Nintendo nerds as well, and that we would love, love, love to work on Super Mario comic books. I want to say, I think one of our artists showed off some Metroid stuff, because I mean, it's not just Super Mario. We the whole gamut. We were like, hey, maybe Kirby, maybe Metroid, maybe Super Mario,
Star Fox.
Star Fox. I don't know if we did any Star Fox, although that would have been awesome if we did.
Well, you should have.
Darn right, yes. So I just realized that I'm pointing at you and you're by the camera, so it looks like I'm addressing the people at home.
Dan knows YouTubers.
Right? We would love for a Nintendo comic to happen. The stuff that I did, the coloring that I did for it, because I colored a couple of covers and interior pages, I think, for it. I believe I can't show that stuff ever because that text stuff is technically like the original artwork that got sold, that's just kind of original artwork, but this stuff would actually be hey, here's what actually got pitched.
So is there more? Because I think what was revealed was a cover and 4 pages with no dialogue, but into just a story of Mario, Mario and Luigi
I think
find some Koopa Troopers. I think that's what's been shown.
Ben Bates showed off some of that.
So is there more than that was produced, or was it just there?
Not that I know. I think that's the most of the stuff. I want to say there's maybe if you've seen some black and white artwork out there of the original artwork, there's probably a colored version of it somewhere. But again, that is stuff that is locked away in the vault, essentially. Which, much to my disappointment, because I would love to show that stuff off. So, you had a question.
I was going to say, so, and you think your coloring style kind of differed between the first crossover, Worlds Collide, which was kind of a little bit more lighthearted, I guess, and
Sure.
then Worlds Unite, which brought in, all the X characters and seemed a lot darker, and I think there were quite a number of different pencils of Sonic compared to the first one.
So the second story arc had a lot more artists on it. Well, actually, a couple more artists on it than the first one. So we had Dan Schoening, as well as Edwin Huang, I believe, and then Tyson did the book as well. And I think Tracy worked on a little bit of Worlds Unite as well. And essentially, for Worlds Unite, it was kind of an interesting thing because Worlds Unite culminates in introducing all these different Sega and Capcom characters. So suddenly it's hey, here's here is the awkward meeting between Sonic and Alex Kidd. No hard feelings, stuff like that. And for me, that didn't feel too much different. They had another colorist handle kind of the first part of Worlds Unite, where it's a little bit darker in tone. And then, as the Sega and Capcom characters show up, it just gets ridiculously silly. And they were like, Matt, jump on it, I was like, it's my time to shine! So for me, there wasn't a huge amount of difference, other than skill, because I look back on some of Worlds Collide, the first one, and I'm like, much like my early stuff, I'm like, I don't know why they let me do that. So,
because it's amazing.
Oh well, thank you. So, yes, you had a question.
When back when you first did the Mogul Rising arc, and you did the finishes for Tracy Yardley.
Yes.
I was interested in what's the process in going when you're not making the art all by yourself, but you're finishing someone else's art.
Sure.
How
so what that is that is a to kind of it happens in a couple of times. That is having a layout artist, and a layout artist basically kind of does the storyboarding essentially. They're like, hey, here's how like I was saying earlier with the storytelling versus regular drawing kind of deal. A layout artist will be like, here's how you are going to tell the story, and then a finisher is the guy that's going back in and being like, all right, like I see that you said that someone is supposed to be occupying this space, I will draw that in, essentially. That was, it happens a couple of times for a couple of different reasons. Like one of them will be for time. Like if an artist is particularly slow at drawing pages, they might get a layout artist to come in and knock out all the storytelling stuff so they can just concentrate on the characters and details like that. If it happens in my case, like with Tracy there, I was super green. Like I had been doing portfolio reviews and all that, but this was the first time I'd ever drawn a book. And so they were like, we're gonna have Tracy do the layouts so that essentially like you won't be too far in over your head. That was a lot of fun. Like I remember that story arc, I believe, like that's the one where Mammoth Mogul takes mind controls like Mina Mongoose and Miles Tailsprower and what's the Mighty Armadillo, all M names, by the way. And then he tries to get Sonic to take control of Sonic as well, because like in the original comic continuity, Maurice, it was his original name. So we were gonna do a nod to Majin Buu from Dragon Ball Z. Like when Mammoth takes control of them, they're supposed to have like the Majin Buu like M on their head. And like we submitted that, and they basically were like, so like I think we had like advertisements running with like Bandai, I think, for like Dragon Ball games at that time, and they were like, we're not sure if that's a good idea to be like using the M from that. So they were like, let's change that. So I think the final version was like Diamonds or something.
Yeah.
It was an interesting issue with that, like just a lot of like inner workings and changes and stuff, like stuff that like I don't think, at least myself at the time, like didn't really realize like go into a comic book making process, like those kind of decisions where it's like, like that one, we can't really use that kind of thing, you know. So you had a question.
I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about the process of, because you talked about, you know, how you did fan comics before going professional. I wondered if you could talk a little about that process from going from really a fan to being a professional. How do you kind of keep it professional without sort of fanboying out, or is that completely okay in your line of work?
You know, like that is a tough line to walk. So the like I read the comics since I was a kid, very, very young kid. So I read the comics when like Art Mawhinney was drawing it, when Patrick Spaziante was drawing it, you know, like, and I was a huge fan of those guys. And by the time I started, Art had moved on, like he was working on other stuff, but Patrick was still doing covers from time to time, and then doing some interiors here and there. And I remember the first time I ever got to color something that Patrick drew, and when I had to email him, I was like, all right, like, I gotta keep this professional, you know? Like, I was like, and that's gonna be really, really hard to do, because I am super fanboying out right now, because I grew up reading this guy's stuff, you know, like, I'm a huge fan of his work, you know, like, I was like, let's keep it together, Matt, you know, like, be professional, you know, like, and I think I did okay, you know, like, I don't think I squealed too much when I was emailing back and forth, but that's definitely like it is a interesting line to walk at times, you know, like and especially like, truth be told, like I mean, like fans taking over and working on a comic book is not unusual. You know, like Spider-Man and other characters have existed for years and years, decades upon decades. The guys writing Spider-Man more than likely were fans of Spider-Man when they were kids, you know, like, so this is like not an unusual thing for fans to grow up and then start working on the material. Like the new Sonic Mania video game is like such an interesting like video game version of that, because like, you know, like Sonic Mania is, you know, like all these guys that have done like fan games and whatnot, you know, like they've had, you know, like fan composers, like, you know, like they were even like, you know, like, hey, like we're gonna get like a fan to do the animated trailer and whatnot, you know, like it's such an interesting kind of video game equivalent of what comic books are, with kind of like the generational advancement, essentially. You know, like where like, you know, like fans have existed for so long, and now fans are starting to work on the actual items and whatnot. And I don't think, you know, like I think you get used to it eventually, you know, like I think you still come to it and you're like, you know, like I'm still a huge fan of this. Like I draw Sonic fan art all the time still. But you know, like I think most figure out how to compose themselves and conduct themselves professionally. But it is a fine line to walk in cons, you know, like I have my moments all the time, you know, like where I'm like, all right, like let me make sure I'm not going too hard into fan mode, you know, like I met the guy from Crush 40 and all that, like the first time ever at a convention earlier this year, like before like the vendor hall opened, he came by and he was like, hey, like, so you do like Sonic comic stuff? And I was like, yeah, like, he was like, so this is me, and I was like, oh, that's why you look familiar, you know, like, and I was like, well, hey, like, I'm a huge fan, you know, like, would you like a free print, you know, like, just like, I was like, you know, like, just doing my best to just not sound too crazy is what is basically my line there, you know. Other questions? Yes?
Are there any artists that, in what you're doing, you might have had a true inspiration from?
Oh, like guys that I like really admire and whatnot. Yeah, like so. I'm a colorist nerd. So being that I do coloring on comic books, like, you know, like I pay a lot more attention to who colors comic books. I'm a huge fan of Matt Wilson, who colors a lot of comics from Marvel. He also colors a lot of independent stuff, like The Wicked and Divine. He colored Black Widow with Chris Samney recently. Just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. Like, you know, like just jaw-dropping coloring. There's another one. Her name is Christina String. She was actually the colorist on Marvel's Runaways for a really long time. And just breathtaking, like just super, just the stuff she did with palettes and whatnot, just really awesome stuff. And special effects too, like just kind of all the stuff that is in my wheelhouse as well, like the stuff that I really love doing. I was like, holy crap, like I don't know how she did this, but I need to recreate that, you know, like, yeah, like just like, I'm a big colorist nerd, so yeah, like I pay attention a little bit more to that myself. So.
You always try to like work on your craft and like see like what more you can do, like what you can like grab from like other artists.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, like anytime I see someone that's like done something really effectively, I'm like, oh well, like I need to learn how to do that too. Yeah. Have questions? Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the comic work you've done tends to be licensed work, and from following you on Twitter, they tend to be like franchises that you're a fan of, like Sonic or Power Rangers,
sure. Or
some of the work you've done, say, on the Turtles books, right, IDW. Does that in any way help you with your work? Like, say, if you were, say, hired to color a franchise you had no interest in, do you think would that be a hindrance, or would that not really affect how you work?
So it probably would only affect in that it would probably take a little bit longer. So like being a big Sonic fan, big Mega Man fan, big Turtles and Power Rangers and all that, like I came to that stuff with kind of a knowledge base already of what that stuff is supposed to look like. I remember for Power Rangers trying out, they sent me a couple pages, and it was one of the pages was all the Power Rangers in their civilian clothes, and they're like, it's Morphin time, you know, like, and it's all of them lined up. And, you know, like, I colored it, and I sent it in, and I remember being like, do I tell my editor that technically the lineup that they've done in order here is incorrect? And I was like, you know, this is probably, you know, like, this is a long shot of me getting this gig, I'm just gonna go for it. And I was like, so yeah, like, technically, like, Dragon Zord is supposed to be the first one to come out. And they didn't fix that in the trade, but I like to think that that level of nerdiness is what helped me get the gig. Because they probably were like, oh, like, well, he already is a big, huge Power Rangers fan, so clearly he knows what these characters look like and whatnot. You know, like, so a property that I may not already have a knowledge base around it just means more reference that I have to look up. You know, like everything else, I'm like, oh, well, I already know what that character is. You know, like, but for something like, I'm trying to think of books that I've worked on. Like, I had to do. I work on a book called Geronimo Stilton with Ryan Jampol, actually. Ryan draws it, I color it, and that I had no idea what it was. My mom and sister are both school teachers. I told them, and they were like, "Oh, Geronimo Stilton," because it's apparently like a children's novel series, and they were hugely excited. And I was like, "I have no idea what that is." Like, and it's apparently a property from Italy, and it is a mouse character that is a journalist / detective, or I guess investigative journalist. You know, like one and the same. So, and he solves mysteries and crimes and whatnot with a time machine. So, and you know, like, so that that involved a lot of reference because I had no idea what it was. So, I was like, anytime a character showed up, I was like, please send what you can because I will be lost otherwise.
So instead of stopping the crimes with the time machine, he just uses the time machine to investigate.
Well, he fixes it. Yeah.
Oh, he fixes it? Okay.
No, there's usually a couple of pirate cats that go back in time, and they will usually try and like rob, like cat burglar style, like they will try and plunder something. You know, like they'll steal like the Rosetta Stone or something like that. You know, like they go back and they steal an artifact, and Geronimo with his nieces and nephews or anyone tagging along. They go back in and they right that wrong.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Time travel.
We ever see a Geronimo still in Sonic crossover ever?
Probably not.
Oh.
Sorry. Crushing dreams. Yes.
As long as we're going sillier questions. So, did Ian ever mention to you, or has anyone ever brought it up to him kind of in a joking way that I think 2 of his letters were published at the end of, like, way past Archie issues? I think he used the Ian Pano.
Oh yeah?
Name.
Oh wow. Yeah, I'm sure someone's mentioned that to him. I'm sure he knows that. Yeah. I'm almost positive of that. I actually wrote a fan letter myself, and it never got published. Probably for the best. And but one of the things that I wrote in was that I was really concerned. Apparently, I was a colorist right from the start because I was really concerned because in the comics, Uncle Chuck, who was a pale blue in the cartoons, was just regular Sonic blue in the comics, and that really bothered the crap out of me. And so I wrote Archie Comics, and I let them have it. Like, I was like, this is so wrong, guys. And as if the stars aligned, my very first issue, 195, The Hedgehog Attic, opens on a scene of Uncle Chuck sitting at a table with, like, you know, like Sonic's mom and dad and Nicole, and I was like, this is my moment. So, and by God, I colored him that pale blue, and I submitted it, and it got fixed from then on. So, righting wrongs, like 15 years down the road.
If only you had a time machine to fix the other comic books.
If only. Yes.
What is your favorite arc of
My,
Sonic comics?
my favorite story arc? Oh, well, like I had mentioned earlier, the Nicole-centric
Sparks of Life.
Sonic universe.
Sparks of Life.
Spark of Life, yes. And like the main Sonic book, I really enjoyed around, I want to say it was around like 225 to, you know, like 230 or so.
Genesis?
Yeah, the Sonic Genesis story. For me, I think that was kind of the first time that I started, like I've been doing coloring for about 1.5 years at that point, and I was like, this is not feeling like total crap anymore. Like, I feel like I'm doing okay at this now. And that was a fun story arc, like with all the video games.
Pencils for, I don't remember which one, but it was the one where Sally was going to make some point with Mac.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, no, that was Sonic versus everybody, basically. That was the first reappearance of Scratch and Grounder and Coconuts from the Sonic Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. And I want to say like Bean and Bark and all of them were in there. Like my favorite is Sonic gets captured in that, and at one point like Bean is like leaning into him, and he's just like asking Sonic a bunch of like weird
Yeah, they
questions.
asked, like, are you and Sally gonna have 10
Well,
children?
right? Like, you know, like, are you guys gonna have like mutant hedgehog babies or something like that? And Sonic's just like giving like this like, you know.
Yeah.
So that was a fun story to draw. So yes.
What would you say is your favorite cover you worked on?
Favorite cover? Ooh. So Sonic Universe number 50 had Metal Sonic on it, and drawn by Patrick Spaziante, and just super gorgeous. Like, you know, like just this really badass shot of Metal Sonic. And they actually did like they wanted the background to kind of like mimic the scene from the Sonic OVA. Just gorgeous stuff. And then the other one, like from Mega Man, my favorite cover would be I want to say Jamal Peppers drew it, and it's like Mega Man, you know, like holding his Buster in his hand, and there's glass in the background that's shattered with Breakman there, and it's just gorgeous stuff. And like Dr. Wily and Dr. Light are in the glass essentially, like reflected in the glass.
The one right before Worlds Collide.
Yes. And then Worlds Collide favorite cover is absolutely Wily and Eggman on a tandem bicycle.
That's the greatest one.
Yep. So, have a question? Yes.
Who is the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, and why is it Donatello?
Leonardo, and I like swords. Sorry. You're fighting like 7-year-old me, basically. Like, you know, 7-year-old me was like, Leonardo, he's got blue and he's got swords. So
you're
and
shallow.
Like, and given my track record, like, you know, like, I mean, Ninja Turtles are green, but Mega Man, Sonic, blue. I mean, I tend to gravitate towards the blue characters, apparently.
So then, is Billy your favorite Power Ranger?
Actually, no. That's sad. It's rough. So he's actually got a really cool story arc going on, like right in the comics right now. Like he and Tommy have been teleported to a dark dimension. So we're getting very centric on Billy and Tommy right now. So, but yeah, no. I was a Green Ranger kid, like I think most people were. So not a ton anymore, but yeah, no, I was a Green Ranger.
I was
kid.
always Jason.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna have to fight after this.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah. Yes.
As a colorist, I wonder what you think about all of like the internet dramas surrounding green eyes, blah, or blue arms, blah. Do you think it's silly, or do you think maybe they, you know, some of those fans have a point?
He complained about Uncle Chuck's blue.
I was gonna say, like, that's true. Yeah, no, like, it's one of those things that, like, I think a little bit of both, honestly. Like, you know, like the attachment to like, hey, like this is what like I like this is what the character is to me, kind of thing. Like again, like with Uncle Chuck being like the pale blue and all that, I was like, this is what Uncle Chuck is supposed to be, you know. Like, I think that both are good. Simultaneously, like I mean, like it is a little silly, you know, like that I was like that like hung up on Uncle Chuck being like a pale blue, you know, like I like. You know, I would say that like I got over it as an adult, but clearly I didn't because I was like, I'm fixing it. But you know, like I do think sometimes it's a little bit silly to necessarily address it. Like I think in the Sonic comics, and this is way before my time. Like I think they actually wrote in like explanations of how Sonic got his green eyes.
They did, yeah.
And I was just like I wasn't reading the books at the time, and you know, like
He went too fast.
and I basically, you know, like I remember like having someone tell me like how it happened and all that, and how like Amy got like aged up, I guess, via the same like magic or something. And I was just like.
Or how Eggman isn't actually Eggman.
Yeah,
Robo Eggman.
I don't know. It was one of those. It was one of those things that I was like, I feel like this cosmetic change could have happened without necessarily being like, we need to like really give a convoluted explanation for
Yeah,
it.
people
You
were
know.
complaining about the reboot, but I think the reboot was a good thing because, in all honesty, the back issues, like as a kid, I read them and I wasn't like, my mind wasn't thinking about it. But as I got older, I was like, wow, this does not make any sense at all.
I did get to read them as a kid. I went back to see, okay, people have said some stuff about these older issues. Let's see how, oh my god, I wasn't prepared.
Yeah, no, it is. Again, it's a little bit of both. Like it's It is ridiculously silly, but I mean, like, at the same time, you know, like, yeah, no, like, I get it, like, you know, like, that, the passion and the drive to be like, you know, like, no, this is the character as I have come to know them. I get it, you know, like, and I think, like, honestly, I think at this point, isn't it that classic Sonic and it, like, post-adventure Sonic are supposed to be two different characters now, or?
Apparently in Forces, classic comes from a different dimension.
Gotcha. All right. So, you know,
Time travel split up.
I don't know.
Timeline.
It can all exist, and everything's good.
Kind of like
Why
with
not?
voice actors, so, you know, people who grew up with the 4Kids ones are like, they're the best. The people who grew up with the Adventure ones are like, they're the best.
Oh, yeah.
Probably, you know, the people playing Sonic as a kid now are going to be like, no, I like the Studiopolis cast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, again, like, everyone has kind of their version of that. Like, and Sonic, like, the interesting thing with Sonic is that he has existed so diversely over the years. Like, you know, like, Mario, like, Nintendo has very, after, like, the early 90s and whatnot, they have, like, really streamlined where Mario shows up. And Sonic, you know, like, he's had multiple cartoons, he's had multiple comic books, actually, you know, like, he's had multiple different games with different backstories and whatnot, you know, like, everyone kind of comes to Sonic in their own way, and that becomes like, hey, this is my Sonic, you know, like, Sonic SatAM is my Sonic, you know, like, Sonic Adventure is my Sonic, Classic Sonic's my Sonic. The random guy that's probably like, Sonic Underground's my Sonic, you know, like.
Saw some of those DVDs out there.
So, other questions? Yes.
ASL.
Right on.
It wasn't a real question. Don't worry about it.
No, I'm curious now. What was it?
ASL.
ASL? Oh. God. You took it way back on me there. Like,
Yeah.
you jumped back to, like, AOL when I was, like, 11 years old. Like,
Yeah.
all right.